Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. This week we're thinking about prayer, and we've got some Bible passages to do with prayer. But in the Rural Challenge this week, I really wanted us to think about prayer lists, how we manage them, how this can be quite tricky in a rural situation, and what we actually do, how we do it in a very thoughtful and careful way. So when I first moved into rural ministry, we had a printed benefice news sheet that went around all the churches in the benefice every week, and on it we had a list of people, names and surnames of people who needed prayer. Now, was that good? I really hope that those people have been asked if they wanted their name to be included on that prayer list. And I really hope that if something had gone onto the internet or sent around by email, that they understood that that was going to happen. One of the issues is that you can get someone in a village come up and go, "Oh, I really think we should be praying for so-and-so." And then you feel that you need to say to them, well, have you actually asked them if they want to be on the prayer list, on the email, all those sorts of things? And you have to then sort of really check with them rather than just putting them on the list. Some people don't want their information on that sort of list, and some people don't want to admit that they're unwell as well, or they want to keep the situation private. And this is a real challenge for us. How do we really reassure people that we are praying for them without letting our prayer lists become a source of gossip? So if you print someone's name on a prayer list, someone will see it and go, "Oh, I wonder what's wrong with them. Do you know what's wrong with them? What's happening to them?" So how do we reassure people that we are praying for them without becoming a gossip factory? This week on Thought for the Week, we're thinking about two passages. We've got a gospel passage in Luke chapter 18, and we have the Old Testament reading, which is from Genesis 32. And they are both passages about prayer, both use different imagery to talk about prayer, for us to think about prayer. The gospel passage, Jesus tells a parable about prayer, and it's about a woman, a widow, and a judge who is not a holy man. He's not that bothered really, as judges go, and she is seeking justice, so she asks him and asks him and asks him and asks him for justice, and in the end he gives her the justice that she needs, not because he is at all bothered about right being done, but because he is bothered that she stop harassing him about it. And Jesus uses this parable to say, it's one of these kind of wings, so he says, what if, even if he who doesn't know what is good does this, then imagine that how God is going to respond to persistent prayer when God is good. I mean, that's the kind of précis of the passage. The other passage that we have is of Jacob wrestling with God. In the passage, it's the word used is a man, that Jacob is wrestling with a man, but it's really used as an analogy for prayer. Jacob is wrestling with this person. Jacob gets his new name of Israel because he has wrestled with both God and humans, because he has used the word shriven with humans and God. So Jacob has wrestled. One of the important things to think about is that Jacob is strongly affected by this encounter. He has a persistent limp as a result of wrestling with this man, but he has wrestled and has overcome in this situation. And I've been really thinking about what a good image of prayer that wrestling is for us, that we are wrestling in prayer. We are wrestling in prayer. It's hard. It's hard. And we bring all sorts of feelings to prayer. We might bring anger and frustration and just the fact that we don't know about something. So we bring our ignorance in a situation where we wish we knew what was happening. And we bring all these emotions to God in prayer when we are wrestling with God in prayer. If this is you at the moment, my suggestion would be that you look through the Psalms until you find one of the Psalms where the person in that Psalm is angry and frustrated and expressing those emotions, in a way which is helpful for you to understand, to be familiar with, to associate with. Because, there'll be one. The Psalms are full of people who are angry with God, of people who are confused by God ignoring them, who are accusing God of actually deserting them. Those are there. The Psalms are millennia old, but they have been kept in the Bible because they are useful in us remembering some really important things about what it means to be human and what it means to be human in our relationship with God, because there's a lot of wrestling. When I was young in the 1980s, I can tell you what we prayed for persistently. We prayed for Northern Ireland. We prayed for the USSR, for the Christians who were being abused in that place and oppressed, and the other oppressions that were taking place throughout the USSR. And we prayed for Nelson Mandela to be released. Those were the things we prayed for. We prayed for them every week. We prayed for them every week for years. We were truly persistent in our prayers. And things changed. How did our prayers mould into that change? Was it that our prayers were changing us? Was it that so many people's prayers were changing the world? It's difficult for us to understand how that relationship works, but we were wrestling with God about those issues. Now, of course, there weren't all perfect solutions, but things did get better, and not a surprise to anybody, there were no perfect solutions, because humans aren't perfect. Quite a few years ago now, we had a very tragic situation in a village where I was working, and a young man died. He was in his 30s, died in an accident, and I had to go and talk to the family. I knew the family, and it was hard. And I remember walking up their path thinking, God, I don't know what I'm going to say. You need to really help me say the things that you would have them hear. And I'd been reading up on some books about grief, and just before that, and they had been saying, well, don't be trite. People are too trite in grief. Don't say this. And what I found myself saying to them was, I am not here to make excuses for God. I do not know why he let this terrible thing happen, but you are going to have to fight your own battle with God about that. A few years later, I bumped into a member of that family at a village event, and they said, that was a really helpful thing for you to say. That was a really helpful thing for you to say, that we had to fight our own battle with God about it. It's interesting when we wrestle with God about things. I certainly think we've all been wrestling with God about the situation in Gaza. And I think because I grew up with this kind of long-term persistent prayer, I will admit to being a little surprised by the fact that peace is breaking out in Gaza. And I will, of course, continue to pray that there will be an establishment of peace, that peace will thrive. Meanwhile, I will continue to pray for the situation in Ukraine and pray for the other conflicts around the world which don't hit our headlines in the same way, and I will continue to wrestle with God about what's happening there. Sometimes when we wrestle with God in the middle of tragedy, we have to think it challenges our theology, and sometimes people need to be brave enough to say things that people may or may not be ready to hear. I was at a funeral for a 10-year-old who died in an accident once, and the person who was preaching was brave enough to say, this child is the only one who's truly alive. The rest of us are slowly dying. The child is the one who is truly alive. The rest of us are slowly dying. This child came from a very devout Christian family, and it was what we needed to hear whilst we were wrestling with God about why he had let this tragedy happen. We needed to hear that. I once had someone who died in our church community who'd been ill for a long time, and people had been praying and praying and praying that this person would be healed, and they weren't. And at the funeral service I felt that I really had to just say, you know, it's hard for us, but as Christians we believe that death is the ultimate healing. We believe that death is the ultimate healing. And we needed to know that. We all needed to acknowledge that whilst we did not understand why God had let this happen, that we somehow got a hold of a bigger picture in the midst of our grief. And that was part of our wrestling with God in prayer about what had happened. Well, I've been thinking about all this wrestling, all this frustration, all this anger, all these problems with praying and how that affects us. I've been really thinking about how sometimes when we're praying, we are wrestling with God. We want to punch, we want to kick, we want to be angry. We are wrestling with God. And sometimes when we do that, God isn't wrestling us back. He's embracing us. He is hugging us still as we wrestle with him. The Dibley moment of the week this week has had me thinking about something which used to happen around our All Souls service. We had a service in one of the villages where I worked where we asked people to submit names of those people who had died that they wanted remembered during the service, and we would read the names out, and most people brought one name to the service, maybe two. A really recent grief with which they were battling. And this one lady, though, always brought a list of 30 names. And we used to sigh a little bit when we received this list, because we knew it would be a difficult read and it would make that bit of the service really long and all those things. And then we knew we had to put all that sighing to one side. Because actually this lady needed help in the grief that she was wrestling with, and so we read them all out, even though sometimes we weren't convinced that some of them might not have been the names of her dogs. Well, that's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where, if you're wrestling with God, you may be strengthened and encouraged.